We are ready to roll. I welcome you all to today's workshop at 1 o'clock on Monday, the 7th of February, I think. Yep. I welcome everybody joining us for the workshop on professional learning communities facilitated by the Wenatchee School District Learning and Teaching Team. Thank you for coming. Les doy una bienvenida a todos uniéndonos para este taller de comunidades de aprendizaje profesional. I hope that's correct translation. Facilitado por el equipo de aprendizaje y enseñanza del Distrito Escolar de Wenatchee. And at that, over to you. It's your show.
Ready? All right. Well, thank you all for being here. We're excited to partner with you today and create some, enjoy some shared learning and some great dialogue. I figured maybe we would start real briefly with just introducing our team. So Amber, can you just start down there and just briefly who you are and what you do with? Yeah.
And Abby. And Sarah Wall, Director of Curriculum, Instruction and Professional Learning.
And Mike Lane, Executive Director of Learning and Teaching.
Corey Callahar, Assistant Executive Director of Learning and Teaching.
Okay, next slide. So our outcomes for today, similar to the last time.
Like, oh,
That's
the old game. If I get closer. Yeah.
Throw it, Corey.
Throw it at her. That's weird. I'm still trying to talk.
We'll be on slide 6 in a minute.
Right here, I have to share. Looking at the authors, like my data. School district to later.
Oh, nice.
Different counties, the river connects.
Oh, there we go.
Awesome.
Oh, that's cool.
Thank you.
All righty, I think we're ready now. So similar to the last time that Learning and Teaching was with you and discussing some data and creating some shared learning, we have outcomes that are broken down into our rational outcomes and then also our experiential outcomes. So rationally, what we want to do for the next 90 minutes is to create or build shared knowledge surrounding the concepts and practices of a professional learning community. In addition, the second half of our time together, we'll be building some shared knowledge around current winter iReady, Lexia, and Sba data. And then experientially, what we want to accomplish is to, one, strengthen our partnership between the school board, learning and teaching team and our schools, but then also give you the opportunity to experience those 3 key SEL practices that we'd like to see in each school and each classroom. So we're going to start by doing one of those. We've got a lot of information to get to today, so we're going to do this one fairly quickly. So just really briefly with that elbow partner, just do a turn and talk. What's one thing you are looking forward to this spring? It can be professional, it can be personal. So we'll do 2 minutes. Go.
Okay. Or are we doing this here? Okay. Okay, just not professionally, just personally. Being out on the trails when they get dry again and running, and then you start biking on the trails again. So that's a good one.
Our next slide. Similar to last time that we were here to present, we're going to go ahead and use the Learning, Recovery, and Accelerate Roadmap as our guide today. We're not necessarily going to hit every single one of those today, and we're going to jump around in the order a bit, but we're going to start. And the second one, which is providing high quality instruction and grade level assignments, which takes us to this quote that is fairly well known among many industries, but specifically in education, we talk about this frequently, that our system is perfectly aligned to get the results that we're currently getting. So if we want to change the results we're currently getting, the way we do that is we change our system or we improve our system. The strategic plan is pushing us in a bold direction for this around increasing teacher knowledge and skills in the area of ELA instruction, math instruction, SEL, and then also around PLCs. That's what we're here to talk about today, is how do we come together as high functioning teams to really address overall improvement for all of our students, but also getting deeper into the equity side of things and doing something around the opportunity gaps that we have among some of our subgroups. Part of the homework that we assigned, apologize for assigning you homework, but one of the things we asked you to do was review some videos Corey and I had created and sent out to all teachers earlier in the year. My video was around collective efficacy, what it is, why it's so powerful, the research behind that. And then the Corey's video was really around our partnership with the PLC at Work folks and the 3-year work, the path that we're going to be on for that. And I'm seeing some squints, so I'm wondering if maybe the links to the videos were not working. Did you guys get a chance to see the videos at all? Couple yeses, a couple no's. Okay, so we'll send those out again because it'll build some background knowledge for you, but we can still proceed today. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Amber, who is one of the things that Amber does for us. And Amber is an amazing member of our team. One of the things that she does is really kind of lead our work around PLCs and collective teacher efficacy. So Amber, take it away.
Well, thank you, Mike. I'm going to stand up. It's okay.
Here we go. Okie doke. So yes, as Mike was saying, is that okay? We are on a 3-year journey with, we're partnering with WASA and a solution tree with professional learning communities. And as part of our work together, Janelle Keating Hambley is our coach. It just feels really loud. Does it feel really loud? And so, yeah, there we go. And so as all the district leaders, we are learning together. That's a big idea of a professional learning community, is that we learn together. And shared learning turns out to be the #1 change agents for us because it calibrates our organization on what we value and what is important. And so that's why we asked you to learn with us using Janelle Keating's book. And I love that you have that here today. So we had you read the introduction and we had you read chapter 1 and just have some questions and key takeaways prepared for today. And what we're really excited about today is that we're going to see Janelle in a minute, meet her via video. And we're going to just watch a couple segments with her and have some time to discuss to continue building our knowledge around professional learning communities. And really, for just one of the big key takeaways that Janelle is writing about in her book, just quickly a little bit about Janelle. She is superintendent of White School District. She is the author of the book you are reading in. She is the co-author of the WASA PLC at Work 3-year grant project. And she is the WSD, she is our district coach. So she'll be on site here February 15th, meeting with our district leaders and leading us through continuous improvement. And from the reading today, the big takeaway that is the lead in to what our video will be about is that high performing teams really rely on the high performing teams across the district. So we don't want to just ask our teacher teams that meet on Mondays. They won't magically be really high performing teams. As Mike was saying, that our systems are designed to get the results that they get. And so that we have to be super intentional from the school board team to the district office team, to the learning and teaching team, to the principal team, down to our teacher teams. They rely on all of us to have really strong alignment in our work. And that's what Janelle will talk with us about today. So I have here, Sarah, I think you passed around, note-taking guide. So on the note-taking guide, our essential question for today is, how can we ensure equity district-wide? And what systems can we put in place to accomplish the district work listed below? Our target is to build a shared knowledge surrounding the concepts and practices of a professional learning community at work. And you can see bulleted there, the work of a professional learning community is equity in action. And that's what our strategic plan is all about. So 5 key things. We are working to implementing a guaranteed and viable curriculum, creating a timely and balanced assessment system, removing barriers by planning and providing additional time and support and extensions for students, all students, and addressing standards-based reporting and grading practices, and finally building an inclusive and healthy district and school culture. All these things align directly with our strategic plan. So what we'll do is go ahead and get into the video link here. And as we're setting that up, if you wouldn't mind just looking at the questions, these are guiding questions. You don't have to take notes, but they're just going to pick up on the key ideas that Danelle talks about. After 10 minutes of watching, you'll have a turn.
We'll ask you then, we're going to use
and you'll get some time. That's okay. You'll get some time to dialogue. And again, so any questions? For clarifying questions? Nope, it doesn't look like it. So let's go ahead and start watching. We'll go to 10 minutes here.
and probably a dated piece, and some of you are still doing this, but I just want you to journal your thoughts. We call that this think in ink. So if you're alone and I pose a question to you, you'll have the opportunity to take some time to think about that. To write it down, and then when you have a chance to gather with your superintendent or the other board members, it will be a spot for you, a place to go back to surface the thinking during this meeting tonight. I too, like Mike said, I'm super excited to be part of this project. This is work that I believe in, work that I've been engaged in for over 20 years now, and I'm going to share those pieces with you tonight. Now, as I joined with Mike Nelson, and what Mike didn't say, we were neighboring superintendents for years. We've known each other for almost 24 years. And when we decided to come together and really talk about how can we ensure learning district-wide, how can we ensure equity for all kids district-wide, we began to think about equity. We could do this by implementing a guaranteed and viable curriculum across the system. And by guaranteed, to determine what's absolutely essential for every kid to learn at every grade level, in every content area or course at the middle level or the high school. The viable piece means, can we pace it out in a way that all teachers can teach it and that all students can learn it? To us, that's a key piece to ensuring equity. Also, can we ensure equity by creating a timely and balanced assessment system in our districts? Can we create equity by removing barriers for kids in our planning process? Knowing the kids that are sitting in front of us, knowing that we're going to have some kids that are going to struggle to access grade level standards, how do we remove those barriers when we're planning and also when we're providing additional time and support and extensions for all our students. And then how do we ensure equity when we begin to start talking about how do we report progress to our parents, report progress based on our standards? And how do we ensure equity? By building an inclusive and healthy school and district culture. And we believe by doing the work of implementing the concepts and practices of a professional learning community, doing the work that your districts have signed on for the next 3 years, we can put these systems in place and accomplish the work above. And not only that, we can act with urgency to ensure that every student is given what they need when they need it. That's what it truly means to ensure equity for our kids. Dr. Anthony Muhammad, who's a leader in this work, in a conversation he had with your superintendents and members of the team at WASA last spring, he just said, if you do the work of a professional learning community, that's equity in action in our schools. Now, across the country, we see that the greatest equity issue is the lack of a guaranteed and viable curriculum for kids. And the researcher and author Bob Marzano suggests that this area is the #1 opportunity to raise the level of student achievement in our districts. And when the exciting piece is, we've been working with your teams, the teams inside your district for 3 sessions now. The 4th session is on Friday, and they're going to spend their time on Friday with Paula Maker, and she's going to be working with them on determining that guaranteed and viable curriculum, helping them understand how to be able to do that inside each of your districts. And that work will continue for several sessions. So again, we want to focus on this first because it's our #1 opportunity to raise the level of student learning for all of our students. Now, I want you to think about this piece for a second, because this in White River, we've been working on this piece for years, that a student's address should not determine what they learn. 4th grade should be 4th grade for all kids. Same essential standards, same rigorous assessments. Now, what we do inside our schools, standard by standard, is provide the scaffolding that some kids need to reach that standard, and provide the extensions that other kids will need as well. So again, 4th grade should be 4th grade. So I want you to think about this piece. Now, this happens in schools and in school districts every day. So think about this with your own school district. So school A, right, teaches equivalent fractions in December. Right? This is 4th grade now, and we know that 4th grade fractions and equivalent fractions happens to be a big ticket item for these kids. So school A is going to teach equivalent fractions in December. School B across town decides to teach equivalent fractions in February. So Sarah is in 4th grade, and she goes to school B, and her parents purchase a house in the school A attendance area. She moves to school A in January. When will Sarah learn equivalent fractions? And it's a pretty simple answer. She won't, all right? She missed that unit of instruction. So when we start talking about a guaranteed and viable curriculum, we're talking essential standards paced out so that all kids can learn them. And in cases like Sarah, if she moved across town, she should slide into that same unit of instruction. So in White River right now, and let's just take ELA at the elementary, they're all working on that ask and answer a question standard, big ticket item. And when a student may move across town, they'll slide into that same unit of instruction, all about that ask and answer a question standard. When we get to the main idea, key details, a summarized standard, perhaps if a student is moving across town, we're going to slide into, again, that same unit of instruction. That's what we mean about that guaranteed and viable curriculum. Versus sometimes our systems are set up because sometimes we want to teach things when we want to teach them as the adults, versus how can we guarantee learning for our kids? Now, our target tonight really is this one. It's around we're not going to talk too much about the board's role next. I have a couple of more sessions with you throughout this year. But tonight, we really want to just take time to build shared knowledge surrounding the concepts and the practices of a professional learning community. And again, these are two of the books that are inside your district as we're going through this work. Now, the first thing you should ask, like, why are we doing this work? Someone asks you that question, we want to make sure that you have the answer. So we're doing this work to improve Tier 1 instruction, that first best instruction inside the classroom. The second reason we're doing it is because with that focus on collaboration and the collaborative team, we have the opportunity to improve the professional practice of all of our adults, that we're going to learn from each other. We're going to get better at the instructional strategies we're using in our classrooms every single day. And ultimately, we're doing this work to ensure more students learn grade level standards and above in every school and every single classroom. So again, pretty much three big reasons: improve Tier 1 instruction in our classroom, right? That first best instruction, every classroom in the district. Improve the professional practice of our adults. So we're talking paraeducators, we're talking all of our classroom teachers and every content area and course. And because of those two pieces, we want to ensure that more students learn grade level standards above. Again, every classroom, every school. Now, Rick DeFore, who's one of the, excuse me, one of the co-authors or co-architects of all of this professional learning communities at work, he says this: the key to improving student learning is to ensure more good teaching in more classrooms more of the time. So if you're asked by other parents, like, why are you doing this? Again, we're going to go back to, because we want to ensure more good teaching in more classrooms more of the time. On the next session coming up, the other co-author or architect of this work, Dr. Bob Aker, will join us in a conversation with you as well. Now, we're going to just start with the end in mind, all right? Like, what does this look like, Janelle? What's happening with these teams every single week?
Okay, this is our first turn and talk and discuss something that is resonating with you so far. And so we have 5 minutes, and we'll just partner up with your partner that you had before and talk about what we're learning from this session with Janelle. Ready, set, go. Okay, I'm going to pull you back together. Sounds like there were some really good discussions. Just wondering if one person wants to share out one thing that was resonating with you and during your partner discussions. Julie, do you want to share out?
Sure. One of the things that resonated with me was this concept of the sort of seamless transitions between schools and within grades, and given our own experience with the COVID, the out of school for COVID, if we had had a system in place like this, it would have created an interesting opportunity to have a designated teacher online for students who had to be out to be able to teach what you would otherwise have been learning in classes and still continuing the classes. So that was an immediate application of where I could see this going down the road. So
That's brilliant. Thank you for adding that. Wow. So level 4. All right, let's go ahead and jump back in. And we are going to now look at a video clip. And Janelle will set this up, but we're going to see a team in live collaboration. It's not one of our teams, it's one of the teams in White River. So.
Because our teachers already get planning time. Well, in most districts, teachers get individual planning time. This is collaboration where they're going to meet with their grade level team. So kindergarten teachers meeting with kindergarten teachers. If you're in a small school, maybe it's the kindergarten teacher working with the first grade teacher. If you're in a large school, it may be 6 algebra teachers working together. So we're going to take a look at a team working today. And I want you to think about a couple of these pieces as you're watching this video clip. Number one, what is this team doing that will have an impact on student learning? Again, we want to ensure that we have more kids learning more in every single classroom. What's this team doing that will have an impact on the professional practice of the adults? Can you see that there's some district systems that have been put in place to advance the work of this team? And again, can you identify the team leader and why? What's the team leader doing at this table that's having an impact on this team? So again, we're going to watch this video. It's going to take us about 3 or 4 minutes. And then I'll put this slide back up. If you're with your team inside your boardroom or a facility inside your district, you're going to go ahead and have about 10 minutes to discuss these questions and actually debrief what you observed in this video. If you're in a Zoom meeting on your own, it's time to get your notebook paper out or journal and just journal what you're thinking. Now, before we start this is a 3rd grade team, all right? And there's 4 members to this 3rd grade team, and they're actually analyzing the results of a common formative assessment that's at the end of Unit 1, all right? So let's go ahead and listen to the conversation.
Do you want me to type?
Yes, we
Okay,
please.
It's fine. Oh, I'll type.
So do we want to start with literary or informational?
Let's do informational, I think, first, because it was one our kids did better on, and then we can get deep with the one that they struggled.
Okay, so informational. What did they do well? What specific items?
I'm gonna pull up the test.
Number 1 was the ask and answer question. They're all ask and answer questions, but
So just looking at the Gubrick document, the second question worth 2 points, using 2 details on why teachers are friendly faces in the community. Majority of my class got 2s on that, which was a lot more accessible than last year.
I would say same with mine.
So
1.
I mean, there were very few that did not get it right, and that's because because they didn't talk about teachers. So most of the class.
I agree.
got
I
it
think the ones that got it wrong in my class at least had used evidence from their head about teachers. I saw that as a pretty common mistake.
So they got 2 points. Most of them got 2 points because they went back to text and used
Yeah.
evidence from the text.
Yes.
Scott?
I'm just looking through this test in general, and I think the reason that students did so well on this compared to the other is all of them are right there questions. This test, apart from number 4, but even number 4, where it's like you have to use detail from the passage, it explicitly tells you, what police officers do. So all you had to do is go back and say one thing that they do, and that supports the idea that they keep the community safe. Like you could pick anything about police officers in the text in there. So I think students are really capable of answering right their questions.
Yeah. Well, anything besides a badge and a hat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll
talk about it.
In that section, it tells 3 sentences.
Right.
It's they keep the community safe, they make people follow the laws, and what they wear.
Yeah.
So it's like
It's true.
it's so
There was
obvious.
only one.
Yeah,
really
and
cool.
that's like the only inference type question, but it's not even
Number
an
4.
inference because there's only one option they can really pick.
Right.
So I think that students are really capable of write their questions. And then on the literary, the reason treasure hunters felt so much harder is because they had to infer a lot more.
Okay, so if we stick with liter or informational here, so really what I'm hearing is all the questions. All the kids were more successful because they were right there questions. And do you guys
Yeah.
agree with that?
I do
Yes.
agree.
I think too, the text was a lot easier to access for them because it was paragraphed by headings. So they were able to, when the question talked about the teachers, they probably went right to the teacher section and were able to break apart that easier since it is chunked so nicely.
So the text was, I don't know, was the word easier?
It's
Is it
organized.
more
and,
accessible?
yeah,
Mhm.
It's formatted easier because of the text features.
So the text was more accessible, formatted easier because of the text features. The students, it was easier for the students to go back and find answers.
Right.
And I remember talking to you guys last year about this test, and you guys said that the biggest problem they had is they would always over inference. They'd use too much background knowledge. So that was something that Katie and Lynn and I thought about in 2nd grade too, to like talk about anytime you're answering a question, then explain how you know what you know using the text.
Right.
Like the teachers were friendly cases. They could have talked about all sorts of things, which it seemed like they did in the past. And I think that you guys giving us feedback in 2nd grade, that has helped this group. Because like I know we met about that whenever you guys shared this test because it looked really easy. But the
Yes.
kids did poorly. So I think just
Well,
like
the other thing too
that
is
conversation
at the
helped.
end of last year, the ELA leadership team sat down and really analyzed these tests and feedback from the TACAs that we got from teachers. And one of the big things was there was not enough evidence about teachers to be
Right.
able to answer that question. And
Yes.
so we sat down and we really added a lot more information into that paragraph so that there would be more for the kids to pull from. So that was a big shift too.
Okay, so what we're going to do right now is it's time. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes. So it's about, we'll come back together at about 5:32, but we're going to go ahead.
Okay, so we won't take 10 minutes, we'll take 5 minutes again. But answering the questions that are here under 7A, B, C, and D, the same questions that are up on the screen, you may answer those in your turn and talk to talk about what you noticed, or you could just be kind of back at that, just what's resonating with you? What did you take away from the overall feeling of this video? And there you go. Go ahead and discuss, turn and talk.
as your lens to begin.
Okay, that's been 5 minutes. Maria and Martin, would you mind sharing out one thing that you really took away from the video?
You go. Oh, yeah, I should have had this.
Oh, yeah, so Martin was kind of being the devil's advocate of saying maybe they need an outsider to kind of maybe guide the work that they're doing. Is that right?
No, provoke the possibility. They
Provoke.
don't know everything, and they're too similar.
Where I'm at, okay, well, this is third grade, fourth grade, whatever. And basically, these are the experts in that content area and following the standards and guidelines of the curriculum.
And then we concluded they desperately need district experts to make sure that all those outside ideas were incorporated in the standards.
Give you a little bit more than you wanted there.
Oh, that's good. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead now and just watch. Janelle's just going to finish out our session here. She's going to talk about, really address question C that says what district systems are in place to advance the work of a team. And she's going to unpack that a little further for us.
Focusing on the piece that you're journaling. So let's go ahead and have that conversation, and we'll come back at 5:32. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call you back. So on this slide, you can see where I'm sitting. This is the district office in White River. And so I want to just talk a little bit about a couple of pieces that maybe you identified in that video clip. And some of it happens to be the reciprocal accountability from the district office and the board, essentially saying, if we want these teams to operate at high levels, what can the district office do to support that? What can the board do to support that? What sort of conversations can we be engaging in? So the very first thing that you probably talked about is these teams have time. When do they do that? We know that many of our contracts, our teachers have individual planning time, but when does this collaboration happen? How much time should we provide? Well, the gold standard is about 1 hour a week. They're going to need more time when it comes to writing the assessments and doing those kinds of things, but we're going to be talking to your superintendents about that during year 2, and just there's some work layered under here. But to do what this team is doing, they're going to need about 1 hour a week. Also, and that's within the school day. So you have to figure, and many of you maybe have that time carved out, or maybe that's the first discussion that we have to have as district leaders. The next piece is there's some collaboration expectations. If you want these teams to be effective, obviously time is a big district resource, and we should see some impact from it. And I'm going to go through those collaboration expectations with you in just a few minutes. Also, there's likely a planning tool that guides those expectations. You never want a team to come to the table and not know what they're supposed to be working on that week. And they'd say things like, oh my gosh, if I knew we were doing that, and they'd have to go back to their room, and all of a sudden there'd be frustration and waste of time. Also, the district has invested in our layers of leadership. We have a trained team leader at the table. That's Mrs. Ross. She had the curly black hair, and we're constantly investing in these team leaders, and they have leveraged this work to a great degree because of their leadership. Every single August, it's a team leader training. And I'm just going to tell you this, the team leaders, I got to back up here. They make this whole piece better. Obviously, this team was prepared. So there were some norms and accountability protocols. The team, you didn't see them entering data at the table. You didn't see them correcting papers at the table, right? That's called entering in data and correcting papers. Versus this team obviously has a norm about what it means to be prepared, meaning data is entered, student work is at the table. Obviously, they had already reflected on how their kids performed, and they were ready to join in that team conversation. There were protocols. Mrs. Ross was using a tool where she was guiding that conversation as they were reflecting on their data or analyzing that data in student work. That's a protocol that we use across the system. Doesn't matter if you teach kindergarten or biology, it's the way we talk about our kids and their learning. Many of you probably noted that they started talking about the students by highlighting their strengths. Like, where did those kids do well? All right, let's celebrate. And then why did they do well? That points back to our teachers and the team and the decisions that they're making. You could tell that the standards were at the heart of their conversation, right at the center of that discussion, that ELA ask and answer a question standard. Obviously, you could see that there was a common assessment as they're scrolling through that screen that's in Google Classroom. And there's a data tool that they're using to collect the data for their kids. Obviously, you could tell that there must be a emphasis on vertical team meetings. Scott in that meeting taught second grade the year before. So when they get together for a vertical team meeting, they have the data and student work. Third grade shared with second grade where the kids were doing well, where the kids were struggling. And second grade made some adjustments, and it made a big difference for those third graders that next year. The data that team's collecting at the end of the unit, we report that data out to our board of directors. Month by month, they see how our students are doing standard by standard. Our board can answer the question, are the kids learning, and how do we know? Standard by standard, school by school. Now, what are the collaboration expectations? We're big believers in putting those collaboration expectations in writing. All right, again, this is a big investment for your district, a big investment that should have an impact on the professional practice of the adults, have an impact on student learning. So there's really 4 expectations. Number 1, we want them to walk into that meeting prepared, where they have data and student work. And the data and student work is based on what was essential last week, not 2 weeks, not 3 weeks, not 4 weeks ago. Last week, they were teaching something that was essential that they wanted the kids to learn, and they're going to have some data or student work at the table. Your secondary schools will not be bringing 150 papers, all right? They have but we're going to ask them to bring some examples of those kids that are doing really well, that are getting the 3s and 4s on your assessment, that are performing at high levels, and then bring some examples of where kids are struggling and where kids are struggling. So we're going to take about 10 minutes and just analyze the data and the student work. A good chunk of that team meeting is to plan what we call then what. All right, what are we going to do for those kids that need extensions? What are we going to do for those kids that are struggling? Now that then what could mean, you know, if you have a lot of kids struggling, that's not an intervention issue, that's an instructional issue. So there will likely be some discussion about reteaching back in that classroom. Maybe Mike Nelson was on my team. He had better results than I did. So Mike's going to share with me the strategies that he used. That's how it's going to improve my practice. And I'll go back and do some reteaching and some reassessing. Maybe the team is going to decide that they're going to plan some additional time and support right in the classroom. Giving kids additional time and support starts with the teacher first, not somewhere that we're sending them, right? Maybe the team is going to provide some additional time and support, because having an additional time and support period built within your school day should be an expectation for every school. Now, then the very last thing you're going to see these teams doing, they may spend 15, 20 minutes on it, is they're going to start talking about what's essential this week. What standard are we working on? What specific learning target or 2 are we working on this week? They're then going to begin, all right, talking about that specific target, talking about the instructional strategies they're using, what resources they're using, and then agreeing to how are we going to check on this and what are we going to bring to the table next week, all right? Now, again, really four things. We want them to be prepared with data or student work based on something they were teaching and the students were learning last week. We want to give them some time to analyze that data and look at the student work. Again, we're going to talk about first where the kids did well, and then where their students struggling. Then that team is going to design those interventions or an extension plan for kids. And then they close that meeting by discussing, okay, what's important this next week? What standard are we working on? What specific target or targets inside that standard? And then what are we going to bring to the table next week? That's it. All right.
That's it. Just a few things. So yeah, that's just a little piece of looking into teams and what high performing teams should know and be able to do. And it's always about that high performing team being able to improve student learning. And that's a wrap for our learning session right now. So I think I'm going to pass it over to Mike, and we'll advance to the next slide there.
Yeah, and let's just actually, we'll just hold here for a second. I think it might be worthwhile to spend just a couple minutes giving some context on the research behind this, because if you didn't have a chance to watch that video, you might be looking at the video of the teacher team's meeting and wondering, well, what is going on here that is so impressive that we need to invest a lot of time and energy and resources into doing that? Sorry. Thank you. So what we know about our students is some of our students are actually behind where they need to be academically. Some of our students are up to a year behind where they need to be. Others of our students are more than a year behind where they need to be. So if we have students who are, let's say, 2 years behind where they need to be, they can make a year's growth every single year for the remainder of their education career and still be behind. So we have to find solutions that offer the opportunity for more than one year's growth within a single school year. And so that takes us to the science of this work, and the research behind the work. The largest, and I'm just going to read, folks, I apologize for that. The largest and most comprehensive study into effective instruction practice is described in John Hattie's seminal book, Visible Learning. In it, he and his team studied over 1,700 meta-analyses representing over 100,000 individual research studies and involving over 3 million students. He and his team focused on 252 influences over student learning, and then he ranked those influences starting with those that actually had negative impacts on student learning, such as ADHD, mobility, and retention, to those that had the very most powerful positive impacts on student learning, such as response to intervention, academic discourse, and students reporting progress and grades, self-reporting their own progress. The most powerful positive influence has an effect size of 1.57, which equates to the possibility of 4 years of academic growth within a single school year. And that influence is called collective teacher efficacy. Collective teacher efficacy refers to a team's shared belief that through their collective action, they can positively influence student outcomes, including those students who are disengaged and or disadvantaged. Now, the first part of that is believing in their ability to do it. And the second part is that belief being acted upon by an interdependent team. So rather than being like a standalone strategy, like we can't just go, hey, Paul, I'd like you to go do collective teacher efficacy today. Collective teacher efficacy is an outcome of highly functioning teams. And so the way that you achieve that is through high functioning PLCs. And I just share that with you to give you a little bit of background on why it is that we're spending so much time and energy talking about these things, because the outcome of this has the possibility to transform student trajectories in a very powerful way. So I just thought it would be beneficial to kind of share that and give you a little bit of background on that. Again, referring back to the video of the teacher team, you could, in your mind, compare that with a team that's not functioning highly. So there would be potentially no common form of assessment. So Corey and I are on a team. I define success on this standard differently than Corey does. We may or may not teach it at the same time. If we do have a meeting about student results, we're not going to have a whole lot to talk about because my assessment is different than his assessment. So that meeting may or may not take place at all. And if it does take place, there aren't any structures in place to keep it focused. So it turns into what we have traditionally seen sometimes, which is ineffective meetings where we spend time maybe complaining about the principal or the superintendent, or, you know, if these parents would give us smarter kids, our kids would improve, right? So that just, you can kind of compare and contrast what you saw there with the absence of that. So anyway, that was more than I wanted to do, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of that background, that feedback. So thank you for that.
Mike, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So I know PLCs has been in the district for a while. Laura, where are we with this? And the reason I mean, I think it would be good to know where we are. Are we kind of doing what the school district in the last couple pages did, recalibrating? Is that where we are as a district with it?
We're at different areas and different levels. I think probably the schools that are furthest in this journey are our middle school, particularly in the ELA, the area of ELA. They're highly calibrated. We can look at results and we can see the results of that. In other areas of the school, this district, we're less far down that road. We have a situation which is somewhat common in that we have pockets of excellence. So you'll go to one school and see potentially one team that is very highly functioning. The next team might not be. That's kind of where we're at now, where we're trying to put a systemic press around this work so that we improve as a system, going back to that original quote. And the saying that you hear frequently is, well, yeah, we've done PLCs for a long time. But what that means is somebody went to a training at one point up in Seattle, probably spent 3 days up there and came back and may or may not have actually implemented anything that they saw at the training, and potentially not everybody was even at the training. So one of the things we're excited about is that the trainers for this approach are actually coming to us. So it's not the case where we have to define how much money we can possibly spend. And we've got a teacher team of 6, but we can only afford to send 3 of you to the training. So the other 3 are going to have to try and learn this secondhand. The way I define that or use a metaphor for that is my daughter rides horses. So horses are a big part of our life. So I could take Paul to the barn and I could put him on a horse and I could teach him how to ride a horse. And he would spend a day, maybe 2 days with me up there, and he would learn how to ride a horse. And then I would ask Paul, okay, Paul, I'd like you to go back and tell the rest of the school board how to ride a horse. And at the end of that experience, you may have little or no idea how to actually ride a horse because you're not the one doing it. So that is kind of what most districts have approached professional learning in the past. So that's why we're excited about this.
The other piece that I'd add to it, I think it is middle or toward the end of my first year when we made the conscious decision to change the elementary schedule. That was a good example of what Janelle Keating was just talking about. We're creating the time. The master schedule is one of the most important aspects of any school because it tells you more about what they believe in than any vision statement on a wall. Do we have time for PLCs to happen? And now at the elementary level, we have time. We have dedicated time. Middle school is like this perfect situation where they have 2 plan periods and we can back them up back to back. High school, now they have time on the Mondays to plan. So those are those structural changes we had to put in place to start making sure we have a system across this organization that is consistently working. So that's another good example of barriers. We're taking away a barrier. So when Mike and Corey and the team are in, they're saying, let me see your Mondays. Let's watch on Monday. And I'll talk about that at the end where we're going to invite board members in to see some of this work in our own school district.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
So this was what I was introduced to first by Mr. Principal Govea at Foothills. Yeah. And just blew me away. And he said in 26 years of educating, this has been the biggest change, the greatest difference, and it's changed everything. And I got to kind of see teachers going into a classroom to do their meeting. And I was like, wow. Pioneer also says they're doing the same thing. And then I didn't kind of understand the concept so much when I first went to Orchard, but I saw the integrating of the interventionists come into the classroom. So then seeing it again that with Mr. Govea next and understanding that it was the change in the schedule. And I understand that the change in schedule now is happened in the elementary. But when I did go and talk to Mr. Anderson, they don't have that. And I asked him, do you have a way to change your schedule that this will work like it's working so beautifully for the middle schools? And he doesn't. So I'm curious to know. I mean, I'm watching this unfold right before me, and it's really, really great and exciting. And I even before I knew about this workshop, I was super excited to go back in and see exactly how the teacher group worked, because I think that knowing that, and then letting other people, parents, understand that is really for a layperson super exciting, because I don't have that, but it's really good to see that, okay, this is how my child is going to be taught when they're falling behind or they're missing this element. How is that going to happen for the high school? He said that there's too many choices of classes and we can't keep them, they can't have all the science teachers for the 9th grade meet at a time.
Yeah. And so one of the good things that we've got going on at the high school is Amber essentially spends 1 day a week at the high school as being kind of their guide on the side as they go down this path. So as you discussed, high schools present a particularly complex challenge, especially large high schools. So they don't have the capacity, just like you said, to have all of the math teachers together at the same time during the same part of the day, because there has to be math every period of the day or there's nowhere for kids to go. Additionally, another factor is frequently high school teachers will teach more than one class. So for example, I may teach algebra and I also may teach geometry. So if I've got one time set a week for them to meet with my PLCs, which PLC do I meet with? So there are some structural things that we can do to address that around using technology, being really specific in targeting. I think we want to target 9th and 10th grade first, and that's where the main focus is at the high school, rather than trying to tackle the entire thing at this point. Amber, did you want to talk any bit more about that, a little bit about the work you're doing at the high school?
Sure, yeah. Well, it is exciting because what we're doing is putting in structures in place, just like you heard Janelle, just really trying to get teams to have the right structures, norms, accountability protocols, an agenda that guides the work so that they're staying on topic of talking about standards and supporting students. So that's been really, really incredible. What I see next as a next move for supporting the high school, because everything Mike said, those are real barriers. It's just a high school master schedule is very different than middle and elementary, no doubt. I think we're making moves, maybe Sarah can talk about this, or Mike, about how to embed professional learning throughout the school year. And that will be one of the biggest answers that will really support the high school. I don't know if you want to talk about that right now or.
Right. We are looking at restructuring our professional learning days. Traditionally, we've offered them in August, and it's a lot. It's a lot for teachers to sit through 4 days of professional learning, no matter how great it is. So what we want to do is sprinkle those throughout the year, approximately 1 day per quarter, which would provide teachers a better opportunity to get together for a longer chunk of time to have these types of really in-depth discussions. That doesn't replace the need for weekly collaboration, but it is a piece of the structure we're putting into place to help build more sustained thinking over the school year instead of just one shot at the beginning of the year.
And the other thing we have is those Monday late starts when teams can get together when kids are not there. We're also looking, we haven't started doing that yet, but the lid calendar for next year, having more of those days be what we call district directed, where we as the learning and teaching leaders can direct what the district is doing during those late starts, so we can get our arms around that. And then the final thing I would say on that is we're going to rely on Janelle. I mean, she's going to be here next week, because that's one of the most challenging things to do is to kind of pull this level of change off at a high school. So she's going to help us with that as well. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of a subject shift here. We're going to get into the next step or another step in our roadmap to success around using student data. So the data we're going to see first off is our iReady data. And one thing I will caveat, I'll tell you, is that the iReady window is still open. We've extended it, and this data was pulled on February 2nd. So we've done a pretty good job getting everybody tested. Even with all the absence, staff absences, student absences, classes getting shut down. Well, that is the reason we extended the window. So most of the tests are in, but we have extended it. So just know that this data is coming from February 2nd. And with that, I believe I'm passing it to Sarah.
So what you're looking at here is our fall to winter reading data. And as Mike mentioned, the majority of our students have tested, although this data is preliminary since the window is still open. So all of our kindergarten through 8th grade students currently take the iReady assessment 3 times per year, as well as all of our Westside High School students this year. Additionally, at Wenatchee High School, our special education students and some newcomer EL students take the iReady test. So here in the triangles, you can see the comparison of our winter data and our fall data. For example, in the fall, 25% of our tested students were proficient compared to 39% now in the area of reading. We also see here a reduction in our tier 3 or our red student group, going from 39% in the fall to 30% now. And then over on the other side of the graph, you can see a placement by domain, and those would just be the strands of reading there.
The lighter colored bar on the strands would be the fall data, and the bigger, brighter would be the winter data.
Right. So then moving on to the next slide, this is the breakdown of data for our K-5 reading. Who's advancing the slides? Oh, there we are. Sorry. Okay, this is our preliminary math iReady data. In the fall, 15% of our tested students were proficient compared to 27% now in that first triangle. Here we see also a reduction in our tier 3 group from 42% in the fall to 31% now. Obviously, we want that red group to shrink. And what happens when the red group shrinks is some of those students go into the yellow category. And ultimately, we want the yellow category students to go into the green category. So then the next one shows, this is our breakdown of data for K-5 reading. Winter is shown there in the top bar with the fall data in the bar underneath that top bar for each grade level. So as an example here, you see 20% of our kindergarten students scored at or above proficient in the fall, which will be that second bar, as compared to 55% now in the top bar. On some of these data slides, I'll just pause for a moment to kind of let you absorb what you're seeing. Okay, so now moving on to our next one. This shows you our fall to winter data for our grades 6 through 8 students in middle school. And then moving on to K-5 math. Here's the fall to winter comparison for K-5 math. You can see here, for example, that 14% of 5th grade students were proficient or above in the fall, compared to the 32% now. And that would be that kind of that bottom section, just to show you a different grade level.
Am I seeing a much smaller shift in the middle school than in the elementary schools across the board? Is
Yes.
there, if you want to comment on it, that'd be helpful.
What's that?
Any comment on that?
Amber, do you want to talk about that? We talked about that on Friday a little bit. The fact that
Yeah.
grade to grow.
Yeah. Past 3rd grade, this is why it's so important for us in our strategic plan that by 3rd grade, we have readers, that are proficient in reading and proficient in math, because after 4th grade, it becomes 4 times more difficult to remediate. And that is what we're looking at right there, trying to close those gaps when now we have adolescent readers and adolescent mathematicians. So.
Yes, and in addition to that, if you were to actually pull the student by student data, what you would be able to see is that although some of these students in the red category are making a lot of growth, they have to grow a tremendous amount to actually move into a new color band. So if you are in the red category, for example, you are 2 or more years behind. So for example, you might be 3 years behind in the fall. You might make a year's worth of growth by the winter. And we actually have this happen if you were to see the student by student data. But even if you grow a year's worth, you're still going to be 2 years behind. You're still going to show up in the red category. So we never rely solely on these colors. We do dig deeper into the student specific data. But it's definitely harder to make more progress the further up you go in the grade levels.
Am I reading the numbers on the end right? The like 445, 505, that's the number of test takers respectively. Any significance in, it looks like we're about 50 off in every category. Is that?
That's because we are not done testing. Because our testing window closes February 17th. So for example, kindergarten, we have 445 had tested when we pulled the data, but we have 505 basically enrolled, rostered. So these numbers will shift a little bit, but we have the majority. So then moving on to middle school math, you can see our data there. Yeah, so we're off in each grade level, we're off by a couple of classrooms as far as numbers of students still needing to test, 2 to 3 classrooms per grade. And now Amber is going to share some of our subgroup data.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so this is showing us our EL, English language learners, versus our non-EL English language learners. So again, in the fall, we had 2% proficient of English language learners and now 10%, whereas compared to the non-English language learners, they were started proficiency in the fall at 33% and then grew to 48%. We have work in this area and we are not wanting to see data like this. We want to close gaps. And so this is why our strategic plan is very critical and our action steps around professional learning communities is critical, because back to what Mike was saying, you know, and we'll organize our adults in these teams. That has a high effect size of 4 years growth in 1 year's time. So that's what we need to be leveraging in order to close these gaps. So go to the next slide. This is then math for our EL versus non-EL learners. So you see the 1% at proficiency and then 5% at proficiency. And then non-English language learners, they started at 20% and grew to 35%. Here we have a comparison between economically disadvantaged and non-economically disadvantaged. So started at proficiency in the fall with 14% and grew to 25%, and then 41% in the fall to 58%. Okay, you can go to the next one. And this is, again, same, economically disadvantaged versus non, now in math. Starting proficiency at 6%, growing to 15%, and then starting proficiency at 28% and growing to 46%. Okay. And then this is for our students with IEPs, starting at 5% in the fall for students on IEPs, growing to now 12% proficient. And then students without IEPs started at 28% in the fall and has grown to 43%. And then here we have again in math for students with IEPs 4 to 8% and then 17 to 30%. Okay, and this is comparing our Hispanic or Latino students with our non-Hispanic or Latino students, starting at 12% in the fall in reading and then growing to 24%, and then 41 proficient in the fall compared to 56 proficient in the winter. It was reading, and then we'll move to math. And then in math, we started with 6% proficient to 14. And then we went, and then in the fall for 26% proficient to 44% proficient. Okay, and then we're going to shift gears a little bit. iReady is, again, it's our universal screener. We give that 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring, and it works for us as an overall outcome measure. It also screens students for early indicators of needing intervention. But now we're going to shift to our Lexia, which is our computer adaptive software for reading. And we use Lexia Core 5, which is aligned with the science of reading and structured literacy, which is our literacy approach in the Wenatchee School District. And this then gives us more, this is more of a progress monitor measure for us. So to get you oriented, the gray bar is start, you see the start and you see current. The gray represents below grade level material. So students are working in below grade level material. The light blue is students are performing in grade level material, and the dark is above grade level material. So what's important about this is that it's telling us from the start of the year to right now, pre-K through 5th students, 27% moved into above grade level material or higher, which is a very nice growth metric. We want at least, we were looking for 25% in February, so we exceeded that. And so that is helpful. So that means roughly 53% of students are either in or above grade level material in a computer adaptive software. Okay, and then this is a really busy slide, so let me break it down a little bit. This is our Lexia Power Up, whereas I just showed you Core 5, and that's pre-K 5. And then this is Power Up from Lexia. This is for our secondary students. So there's 3 big areas, 3 components. There's word study. You can see it at the top, and then we're going to see a second bar graph for grammar, and then finally you'll see comprehension. So this same thing, we started, there's the placement, and there we are with current. But the colors are just a little different. The light is foundational, which is K2. Intermediate is the dark, is the medium blue, and then advanced is 6 through 8. And so in word study, we've moved 14% of students have moved into intermediate or advanced. Again, we don't see the growth that we did in elementary. Remember, elementary was at 27% showing growth. Same reason. And then for grammar, we moved 7% have moved into intermediate or advanced. And for comprehension, we've moved 11% into intermediate or advanced. And that is, again, works as somewhat of a progress monitor, gives us just a little, like, put our finger on the pulse to see where our students are month to month, rather than iReady that's helping us fall, winter, and spring. Okay.
Okay, so today we thought you might like to see a couple of our instructional tools, and that's why Amber kind of walked you through Lexia. We also want to show you this example from iReady. Our teachers, of course, have lots of different instructional tools, but I thought this one would be interesting to you. So this is an example of a resource that's available within our iReady platform that, you know, we adopted and purchased for our whole district. When students take the iReady assessment, they get a variety of data reports. One of those is an instructional grouping report that looks like this. And basically it's generated to group their class of students based on how they scored in the different domains of math, or if you're looking at the reading report, the different strands of reading. So the different domains of math, meaning numbers and operations, algebraic thinking, measurement, and geometry. This is a second grade example that I'm showing you today. As we look at the next slide, from there, teachers can click on a certain grouping to see the instructional priorities and recommendations based on how those students scored. This can be super helpful for providing additional instruction or intervention to students within each grouping. So this shows you an example of what grouping 2 needs a lot of help with. And that looks like a lot of words. It is a lot of words, but the idea is that it gives teachers really meaty information to work with. So moving on to the next slide. This tools for instruction component is available within this part of the program. So once the teachers know which groups their students basically go into, and they're able to look at their domain information and they're able to look at the instructional priorities, then they can go into this tools for instruction and see mini lesson plans that can be used to teach those specific skills that those groups need. So these tools for instruction are really handy because they're mini lesson plans and they're available in both English and Spanish, which is really nice. When we go on to the next slide, you can see an example of one of these mini lesson plans. So they're provided here with a simple, really easy to use instructional guidance plan focused on filling a very specific skill gap. This one happens to be counting backwards by ones. And the nice thing also is that these mini lesson plans can be used by teachers, intervention specialists, paraprofessionals. Anyone who is basically given this mini lesson plan knows exactly how to teach that skill, how to check for understanding, and how to diagnose in the moment whether students are grasping the skill. So that's just kind of a short and sweet intro to the tools for instruction. Now I'm going to hand it back to Mike Lane as he's going to continue by sharing our Smarter Balanced data.
I know that iReady, you said when they do that, the Lexia, how often do they do the Lexia testing to evaluate this?
Right, so Lexia is a little bit different because it's an online instructional program that students are using on a daily basis. And so every time they complete a lesson, it's uploading with new information.
I have a quick question about timing as well. For the iReady, you mentioned we do it 3 times a year. My understanding was the fall test that was administered was the spring test for the grade below the year before. So is this winter test actually the fall, what would have been a fall test? And does it matter? Does that make sense?
I think you're
setting
referring to
like
SBA,
yeah.
maybe not already. But go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, you're setting Mike up for this next section,
Yeah.
really.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, another brilliant
No,
comment. Thank you,
I
Julie.
had heard something, about them taking, I mean, I knew the SBA was advanced, but I thought for some reason the iReady that the kids took in the fall was actually the year before's test as well. So really this winter test was what would have been fall for their new year. Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, the iReady fall test is just what the iReady fall test is every year.
So SBA, so just a couple of background points before we throw the scores up there. The U.S. Department of Education waived testing requirements in 2020, so we did not give a test in 2020. The state of Washington requested to have the waiver extended into 2021. That was denied, but they did give us the flexibility to use a slightly shortened test and test at a different time. So Julie, what you're referring to is the spring test that students should have taken in the spring of 2021 was actually taken in the fall of 2021. So for example, but the material they learned last year, they were actually tested, they weren't tested on that until fall of this year. And so that gives you a little bit of background of kind of the wacky nature of this set of data. Superintendent Reichdahl, his take was that we're not going to spend a lot of time of energy here because there are too many unique factors. We do pay attention to it anytime we get student performance data. So that it's not that we're going to ignore this, but we are going to understand the context with which it was administered. So There's a national trend of lowered scores, and we were right there with that national trend. So here are our SBA scores. 38.2% of students, Wenatchee students, were proficient in ELA. In math was 21.5, and in science 34.9. Yeah. 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 So those are not encouraging. They're also probably not totally surprising either. We are coming to understand that the impacts of the pandemic are going to be with us for some time. We're seeing it even more each day around student behavior and what's going on in our classes right now, to such a degree that we believe that might be a couple of years that we'll just be continually kind of focusing on the negative impacts of what everybody went through and kind of the trauma that was involved in that.
Can I ask a quick question about
Sure.
doing the spring test in the fall after the summer recess and summer forgetfulness? Would that have potentially been a factor?
Well, yes, absolutely. And you would not, if you were to design an assessment and say, you would never design it in that way, that we are going to wait a big chunk of time and have a summer break in between when we assess and when we teach. We would not. That's why the numbers are, like I said, they're disheartening, but there is a context to them. So next slide. This gives you the kind of the trend. As you can see, we had a slight upward trends in ELA and math, and both of those came down, dropped by, ironically enough, both dropped by 16% with this latest round of data. We are looking forward to getting back into a normal cadence of SBA data, because we do use this data. It's very instructive of what our systems are doing and where we need to make improvements. Our students will take yet another SBA this spring, and then that'll be the data that we'll be able to share and use going into the fall. Usually around August is when we start getting that, or June, July, August, we'll start getting that data back. Corey, do you want to talk just briefly, when you look at the slide on the science side of things, you can't help but notice that it looked like, the world stopped spinning in 2018. So
yeah, I'll just approach that really quick, because it is pretty drastic when we look at 82% going to 41%. Well, we had a lot of changes in science in the state and in the nation were happening during that time. There was a switch in all of the standards for science. We moved to next generation science standard that year, and they completely revamped the test. And then we retooled who actually took the test. So it moved up to juniors that year. And it was just not indicative of, as Mike mentioned before, probably a great way to plan assessment during that. But we have aligned our curriculum and our teaching to the next generation science standards. We were working on that in the years previous to that test. And I think that you'll be happy to see our science scores moving forward will again move ahead in that trend. But it was just an interesting change that happened, and that was right during the testing of 2018. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. So the next slide here brings us to ensuring all students feel welcome and know they belong. And this is kind of our SEL slide. And one of the things that I want to share on SEL to get us started is just a couple of statistics. So the CDC reported from March to October 2020, the mental health related ER visits increased 24% in school age children 5 to 11 and 31% in teens age 12 to 17. Another national survey from America's Promise Alliance found 1/3 of our youth respondents feeling depressed. And these are both statistics come from an article entitled Why Kids Need SEL. And one thing that we know is that learning cannot happen until students heal or attempt to process what it is that they've been through or gone through. And social emotional learning is a path forward toward that healing. And what we also know is that by using social emotional learning in the classroom, teachers can check in with their students about their well-being. So that's one of the reasons why we're so excited about what's happening in social emotional learning. And especially during this increased intentionality during the times of inconsistency in our students' lives and the time of unknown SEL is alive and very much well in our elementary, middle schools and high schools. And last time I talked to you about curriculum and implementation and the things that are happening. But this time I thought I would just tell you about some other things that we're doing to wrap around social emotional learning. One thing we have is the Wellbeing Project in its second year. We have a presentation on March 16th with Dr. Maza from the University of Washington. And they are also partnering with our high school with our forefront work that we're doing in suicide prevention as well. And we're going to do a community evening about all things pandemic and trauma associated with that, resiliency, coping mechanisms and strategies, and celebrations while we're living in this topsy-turvy world. So we're really excited about that work. The Wellbeing Project is also working with students. One student particularly at Westside right now who has kind of risen in his knowledge and understanding of trauma, social emotional learning, and adverse childhood experiences. We're going to work with him to make some TikTok videos and hopefully to have very consumable programming for our teens in the district so they can see these messages that will have a meeting. They will be funny in nature in some of them, and they'll be very serious in others. And so we're really excited about getting that programming out to our students and actually giving it on a platform that's engaging to our students as well. We're also building and strengthening our community partnerships with CVCH and Confluence Health around behavioral support and mental health. They keep us informed on what they're seeing. We keep them informed on what we're seeing as well. And then just quickly, we have a Wenatchee School District Social Emotional Committee or team that is working feverishly. We had our second meeting in January. We're doing a reboot of our social emotional learning website, working with a program called Homeroom to increase our efficiency in schools on how we access data and see where our students are being successful or not. We're also doing grade level program review at elementary, middle, and high school on what our curriculum is, how it's working, and how it's impacting our students. And then we're also grappling with this idea of what does sustainability for social emotional learning look like over the course of time and moving into the next few years. And I know that we went over a little bit there, so I appreciate the time. Yep, this is what we can cut this optimistic closure, but this is what we have our leaders do at the end of our meetings when we look at data and we actually go through the PLC process from an administrative level. We wanted you to get an idea of how we extend that learning out and prepare for the next times together. So again, I want to thank you for your time today, and my colleagues did a great job with the bulk of the presentation. So good job, team. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, team. I really appreciate it. But I think from that optimistic closure for the board, just to kind of go around from this or those takeaways that you had from today, just kind of wherever any board members at and their thinking from this work today.
I'll start. I am super excited about it. I'm super excited to learn more about it. Before this workshop was even a blip on the radar, and I was excited to go back to Mr. Govea's school and have been invited by all the middle schoolers to learn what this is and see it in action. Because again, as I said before, I think it's so important to be able to, as a complete layperson in the area of education, to be able to articulate back to parents and the community what is happening in the work that is being done to bring those numbers up. If there's a huge group of people that are only concerned about our numbers, and what this is clear evidence that I would like to be able to articulate that is what you are concentrating on. And it's a great thing to see. It's been really neat to see the little bits of it that I've seen already, but I am already wanting to schedule my next round of visits at the school so I can understand it better and learn more. So this was a really perfect timing and a great chance for me to understand a little better what's going on and what PLCs are. So I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
So I'm pleased and relieved to see current student data again, even though it's not a rosy picture that I would like to see. It's interesting, I thought, to hear acknowledgement that COVID recovery, learning from learning loss, is going to take us several years. I think that's a good thing to recognize and to speak about. and to just acknowledge that we do have that role in front of us. So I'm just looking forward to more student data in particular. And then also, when instruction becomes individualized, when you have students who are not getting it for whatever reason, I would like to see some examples, real world examples of how those students are being helped or assisted to get up to grade level.
We'll go in order, I guess. I'm with Catherine. I think that knowing and having a better understanding of what PLCs is in the district and how the school board is part of that work, to be able to answer, okay, you know, what are we doing and how are we doing that and where are we? Which incorporates the data as ugly as it is. I think we heard a little bit about this with Tricia Lubach, that the district's success is based on the collaboration between the school board, superintendent, leadership, and whatnot. So I'm excited to know more about it and how it's being implemented. I do have a lot of questions, and it probably stems that I'm not, you know, in the buildings. I'm not a teacher, but I think I got some answers as to how this works with our strategic plan and our values of equity, and just developing on those concepts.
I'm going to comment on what made me happiest is this is a 3-year project, so nobody is underestimating the heavy lifting and the work and the follow-up and the continuity and maintaining it.
Couple comments. First, I just want to sort of congratulate this team in front of us, or just tell you how much I appreciate and acknowledge the work that you've done. I know one of the pieces we read in the book is you got to have buy-in and have the why. And I think your interaction exchange today was a good demonstration of a high functioning team. So I want to applaud you on that one. As for the PLCs, I am really excited to learn more about it and to see what this could potentially do, both for our teaching staff, to give them some resources to work together, and then for our students, especially to help them find those gaps, help bring them up, especially with the challenges of COVID now, going to take several more years. It's glad to see some student data. Again, it wasn't the data that we want to see necessarily. Good to see that there's been some improvement. I agree. I'd like to see some more drill down in it in terms of what is working. Having 3 students in the district, I know I've heard lingo used on some of these tools, but when are we identifying needs? How are those being allocated, and are we seeing an improvement? I know we've allocated a lot of stipends to teachers to work with students. I'd like more feedback on what we're doing to push those, keep pushing it, especially if we're finding out that we need to make up years and years, and it could be years. So, but I appreciate seeing the data. I want to see more and hear more about it. Just kind of sad and heartbreaking to hear about the impacts on students, but I know we're doing what we can to help get them out of it. So appreciate all the work everyone's been doing.
Yeah, I would echo the comments. Outstanding job learning and teaching. Those numbers are not where we want. They are ours. It's, that's our reality. That's where we're at, and we're going to continue moving forward. I am very pleased as our team is, and our district is focused on our strategic plan. And when I look through our strategic plan, you see this work coming to life. You see the importance of our professional learning communities. You see the importance of grade level assignments being given to our students and high quality instruction occurring within our district. Those are the gold standards to improving outcomes for students and where we're at and what we're doing, our social emotional learning. So I see this work coming to life in our organization and living through our strategic plan, which is so incredibly important that we continue to monitor it. We continue to make sure that we're following the values of the board around the accountability and bringing that data back to the board and back to the community so they can see what we're doing. But the other thing that I'm excited about, what you will see in your email box here in the coming days are invites. We're going to put 3 different times out. So you're going to schools to see PLCs in action with the principal. So it's a focal point for the board to see, okay, you saw White River, but let's see our schools, the work our leaders are doing and our teachers. So I'll be sending out this first round will be through our middle schools. We'll have one opportunity at each of the middle schools. We'll try to get board members to go 2 by 2. I know we're 5, but we'll make sure that works for everybody. Yeah, it could have a straggler or somebody who wants to go twice. My friend over here. But we really do want to frame these learning shops to see the big picture, see where we're going, but then to see it in practice, because that's where you're going to be able to ask those questions, those specific questions at each of the levels, and teachers are going to be able to respond saying, this is what we're doing. These are the things that we're doing, the principles, and really trying to make sure that you see our work firsthand, that it's not something that just lives on the screen or on the strategic plan, that you see our leaders leading this work and our teachers engaged in this work. So I'm really excited about that. So you'll be seeing that. You just sign up for one of the 3. We'll have a morning, we'll have a midday, and then we'll have an afternoon, because we know the work schedules and life schedules for all of you are a little different. So we'll try to make sure that occurs. Mike's quote that was put up there at the very beginning. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. My team hears me preaching that every day of the week. We are about creating structures. What you heard here today were structures. The schedules that we're creating are structures. PLC is a structure. All of these different pieces, they're around these structures. So we're trying to build this high functioning system that works for each kid. We're not there yet. We're working feverishly, as you can see by this team, our leaders in our buildings, our educators, and everyone else. We're working feverishly to put together a system that literally works for each kid. And that's what it's going to take. But just know, we know our data. We're not happy with our data, but we know where we're going, and the systems we're putting in place are all research based off the best practices, and that's where we lean our work into. I really appreciate the board attentiveness and their diligence on this and their buy-in to this, because without you approving way back when, roughly $350,000-$60,000, that was a large chunk of change that continues to be invested over 3 years period of time. So I just really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
And I just want to close with gratitude. Yep, sorry. We put the hammer on ourselves to do what is right and good for students, and we're not going to relent on that, but let's turn it around. I want to express my gratitude to the 4 of you who presented brilliantly, dedicatedly, and with heart, and thank you very much.